Are you thinking of owning your dream homes? EJ Investment is here for you. Secure our quality bungalows with 2, 3 or 4 bedrooms, or our story buildings 3 or 4 to 5 bedrooms at very affordable prices with flexible payment plans at our Sanyang Seaview Estate, where you can enjoy the cool breeze with modern infrastructure such as tar roads, covered drainage system, modern electrification with street lights, gated entrance with security posts, and social amenities such as gas station, shopping mall, medical clinic, park, schools, children daycare, and a lot more. Our dedicated team of professionals will keep the estate clean at all times, provide security and patrol team within the estate premises, install latest technologies such as CCTV, Wi-Fi, home network installation, solar panel, and power backup system. Also, check out for our additional home facilities and interior design service such as premium tiling, wall plaster, home landscape, fingerprint home lock, and a lot more. Visit our office at Senegambia Kololi Highway and get a free site visit tour, or contact us on 4464-838. WhatsApp us on 3259220. Or you can visit our Facebook page or Instagram on EJ Investments. EJ Investments, we are first in properties.
All right.
Honey, did you remind him that the last time he sent the money, it was not enough to buy all the provisions?
Oh, sorry, I forgot to tell him.
Are you guys talking about money transfer to buy provisions?
Yes.
But don't you know about Baluwo?
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 What is Baluwo?
Baluwo is a service that your son can use to send provisions directly to you guys from the shop. And you don't have to worry about the exchange rate.
Tell me how Baluwo works.
It's very simple.
Just log on to baluwo.com and shop, or download the app on your phone. You can shop on the website or using the app to buy online basic products for your family and friends. With Baluwo, you decide what your money is spent on. Your money, your choice. Buy online products for your family and friends in the Gambia, Senegal, Nigeria or Mali. Baluwo, better than sending money.
So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank everybody who's come here today. Representatives from the police, the municipality, but also members of civil society and our colleagues at the Westminster Foundation. I'm very pleased to be here at the launch of this report. I am going to hand over straight away to our colleague and our partner in this very important piece of work, Madi Jebadi, who is going to start the proceedings today. But as I say, this is an important piece of work, looking at the effects of this pandemic on some of the most disadvantaged in our society. But Maddie will tell you more about the work and before we launch the report. So, Maddie, over to you.
Welcome to all of you to this sort of special event, which is actually funded by the British High Commission and then implemented by Westminster Foundation for Democracy. Some of you may not know much about Westminster Foundation for Democracy. It established office in the Gambia in 2018 for the first time to support the democratization process in the country. And that's the whole idea behind WFD, or Westminster Foundation for Democracy. It's got country offices around the world to support strengthening democracy. So this project came largely within that context, in the wake of the pandemic that hit the world, late last year. And as we know, not just the Gambia, but governments all over the world had, to put up with, all sorts of measures to see how to contain the spread of the virus. And so the Gambia was no exception. And I think, if I recall fully, was on March 18th, actually, when the Gambia launched, or the president declared a state of emergency, public emergency, and which came with a host of regulations on public gatherings like this and face masking, movements and so on. And certainly it affected life and livelihoods in the Gambia, as it is the case in almost everywhere else in the world. And so since then, a number of measures have been taken by the government at various times. There was in fact a curfew at one point. There was food distribution. So to a large extent, the government attempted to respond to the situation. In the same way, we've seen how civil society and even political parties in the Gambia, the private sector came in to support, individuals came in to give all sorts of support to communities, but also to engage in massive sensitization for people to understand what this virus is about and how to prevent it. So it's in consideration of this national response that WFD conceived of the idea of looking at the nature, the extent to which this national response was implemented, so as to look at how efficient, effective, and responsive it has been, and particularly looking at certain sectors of our population. In this case, women and persons with disabilities. So we wanted to check how inclusive, how participatory, and how much access women and persons with disability particularly have during this national response, in protection of their rights and needs, in the way the decisions that have been taken by the government, the various interventions impacted on them. And so what we did was to hold 3 separate discussions, consultations with the various groups. On one side is the persons with disabilities from the various organizations that they constitute. We had representatives from there. And at a time, actually, when in fact public gathering was more or less still restricted in the Gambia. So that was one consultation we had to do online, virtually. But the second consultation was with the women's rights organizations in the civil society. And so at the time, the conditions or the restrictions were relaxed. So we were able to have an in-person meeting, even though still the option was there for those who may wish to join online to do so. And so we had some people join online. So we had a good conversation. And then the third separate consultation we had was with the National Assembly and government representatives, particularly those relevant institutions, health, education, Ministry of Trade, Ministry for Women's Affairs. Those that are very, in the center and front of the national response to, have a conversation around the decisions and the actions that they've taken. So at this point, maybe I should just say all of the conversations actually were facilitated by a very strong woman at the back, Anna Nancy Mendy, who actually is an expert, gender and disability expert from the Ministry of Education, or Basic Education. And so we had good conversations with all of these groups. So to say therefore, what we did was eventually to gather all of the issues, the discussions that we've had into a report, because we felt the report is important. It is important to gather all these conversations, put it in a report, which could be a resource, a tool, not just for government, but for all of us, for all stakeholders, to get to see the issue from the point of inclusion, from the point of participation. And so there are lessons for us all to learn. So that is the report we have. So this report essentially contains the ideas of the participants. So it's not the opinion or the view of the Westminster Foundation for Democracy or the British High Commission. It is entirely what we have gathered from the participants themselves, the conversations, what we thought that they have said, that we put together in this report. And so the report brings out the issues in terms of what came out, the challenges, the gaps, but also the successes and the best practices, from the restrictions, the decisions that are taken to impose these public emergencies, but also the implementation, for example, in terms of law enforcement. The curfew was done, and we know individuals were arrested or even put to court for not abiding by those restrictions. So because of all of those things, as I said as well, government did provide food relief to communities across the country. So looking at all of those issues, those actions, did they consider the particular circumstances of women across the board in the Gambia? Did they consider the particular circumstances of persons with disabilities? If you say vehicles cannot, public transport would now have to have their number of passengers, would that affect this person or that person, particularly if that person is so with some disability? If you impose curfew, what is the impact on especially a woman who sells in the market, has to travel kilometers to go to the market and back? If you stop public movement and impose certain restrictions that would cause, say, hotels to close. When hotels, for example, close, who is the first person they most likely would lay off? Could that be a woman, for example, because she is at the lower level or the lowest level of the of the staffs? And so these are all issues that came out in the consultations, especially with the women and the persons with disability. But even with the people from the government side, we've had very honest conversations. For example, people from the police did highlight, things that may not have been considered at the very beginning of imposing the curfew. When you arrest all the number of people, what happens now? Where do you put them? Men and women, do we put them all in the same place? So very interesting issues came out that tells us that, yes, there was an ambitious national response, but did this response actually look at the specific circumstances of specific populations? And the whole idea is to make sure that ultimately, and in future, when we engage in these kind of emergencies, when these kind of situations emerge, it is important that lawmaking, service provision, these restrictions that we would come along are considered, are holistic, are comprehensive, and which means they are inclusive, to ensure that there was consultation. Because persons with disabilities, for example, until now, from March until now, they've not had any direct consultation with any government department to look at how these restrictions are impacting on them. So, that's a lesson that we need to learn. In future, when we have to take such sweeping, very harsh decisions because of the circumstances in which we find ourselves, that, it would affect some people more than others. And so it is necessary, important, that we look at those individuals or communities in order to ensure that ultimately it doesn't affect them so adversely than the rest of the population. So these are the issues we discussed. And so at the end of the day, as I said, we have put all of these things into a report, which the High Commissioner would launch, or release eventually, and which we wish to share with all of you, but outside there with all stakeholders, government, the private sector, the civil society. Hopefully, individuals would find one or thing to learn from, to guide us to improve our decision making and overall our governance, and which is essentially what democracy is all about. How do we make it that inclusive and participatory? The exercise is important and very enlightening for me personally. I'm not sure whether we've had this kind of activities before in this country, that is to subject a national response to some assessment. So it's sort of like a self-assessment and an accountability exercise that as a nation, we engage in an exercise. Through that exercise, down the line, we come together to review ourselves. I think that in itself is how nations grow, how people grow, how people develop. That is, if you have the ability to do self-examination. So this exercise, or this report, in other words, let us look at it from that perspective, that it is merely a national self-examination exercise on an issue that is so fundamental, because the COVID-19 continues to be here, and we hope we're not going to get a second wave if we had that already, or not a third wave. But I mean, in any case, let it be where it is and probably just drop down. But I mean, emergencies would emerge, and so we would have to respond to them. And in that response, it is important that duty bearers, the state at all levels, who bear responsibility to take decisions, to distribute resources, to provide services, to consider that in our society also, we have all these categories of populations. And so we need to cater for their specific needs in order to ensure that we minimize or mitigate whatever adverse effects that may take place. So having said that, given that this was a conversation we've had with a diverse set of people, I thought, with the High Commissioner's permission, that we would have some voices to also share general impressions, brief remarks, about the issue we are talking about here, the national response and its impact on women and persons with disabilities. So I'm going to have representatives from the disability community to be delivered by the President of the Gambia Federation of the Disabled, the Honorable Magistrate Krubali, but also from the President of FLAG, a remarkable woman who is very strong on the side of women and child rights in the Gambia. But before they come, I'm going to have Nancy Mendy. She facilitated this. I want all of us to give a round of applause. This is a local talent, skill that we have engaged, and she facilitated the conversations quite well. And so, briefly, as someone who had facilitated this, what are your impressions? And, yeah.
Thank you very much, Madi. Good evening to all of you. We can all attest to the fact that we have all encountered challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic and still are. As a facilitator for the 3 sessions organized for persons with disabilities, women CSOs, and government officials and NAMs, I can say that these sessions provided the different stakeholders an opportunity to reflect on their experiences, successes, challenges during these challenging times. It further helped participants to reflect on the policies guiding implementation of strategies put in place during the COVID-19. Participants gave their frank and honest opinion of their experiences. The conversation centered on how COVID-19 has impacted people in the Gambia, specifically those with disabilities and women, and to determine how inclusive the Gambia government was with regard to access to services during the COVID-19 pandemic, and what strategies can we put in place to ensure that even post-COVID-19, all citizens will be adequately taken into consideration and catered for. It was interesting to find out things that what people generally will take for granted were challenges to some groups of Gambians. The conversation was frank, highly interactive, and constructive. The dialogue was crucial, and I hope that lessons learned will go a long way in ensuring an inclusive Gambia, where all stakeholders will be consulted, included, and participate for a better Gambia. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Anna. On that note, we wish to have a very sweet and short ceremony here. So I'd wish to call on the President of the Gambia Federation of the Disabled, the Right Honorable Magistrate Mohammed Krubali. You have the floor, please.
Good evening, everybody. As he rightly introduced, I am Mohammed Krubali, proud to say Gambia's first and only visually impaired magistrate and a lawyer by profession. I'm the chairman of Gambia Federation of the Disabled, commonly known as GFD. I am before this gathering to inform you of the response coming from the persons with disabilities during the time of this COVID-19 and during the interaction that we had with Honorable Madi Jobate, Anna Nancy Mendy, and the Honorable British High Commissioner. This conversation was so interactive, coming from different persons with disabilities, because we have the feeling that usually during difficult times or moments, persons with disabilities are always considered as the most vulnerable and the most disadvantaged. That would always be the last to receive at least emergency, let's say, response. If you look at the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, undoubtedly it has enjoined states to ensure that in terms of natural disaster or risky moments, persons with disabilities should be given due consideration in order to exonerate them from difficulties. It is definitely unfortunate that COVID-19 has definitely posed a lot of difficulties to the lives of persons with disabilities. It increased poverty within the disability community. It restricts their movements, and they were not able to reach where they were supposed to reach in order to earn a living, to support themselves and their families. Of course, you can see that in terms of education, persons with disabilities were the most that were affected. They could not attend their lessons effectively and efficiently because online classes were introduced. Persons with disabilities could not get access to technology in order to equally participate, just as others. And of course, if you look at it again, persons with disabilities could not participate, in lessons because they could not have the money in order to access the internet. Persons with disabilities were not given that enabling environment. If you also look at earning a living, as I've earlier indicated, persons with disabilities suffered because the state do not actually do much in order to set up any plan or any program in order to rescue them. There was no specific national response to assist persons with disabilities in terms of this difficult moment. It's just that certain communities were considered, but persons with disabilities keep asking as to when they will be able to have a response from the government side. And today, if you look at health and health services as well, the fact that certain hospitals were closed down, certain persons with disabilities could not actually make up in order to access treatment in terms of health and health services. So obviously, as we have just had commemorated the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, the theme for this year has sent a message. And what was the message? Building back better towards disability inclusive, accessible and sustainable post-COVID-19 world. How can persons with disabilities be inclusive into programs, decision making? How can we build back together? How can we be given accessibility? How can we actually be given consideration in terms of sustainability in the post-COVID-19 world? Because remember, as of now, we are not only considering COVID-19 itself, but post-COVID-19, how are we going to put up plans in order to assist persons with disabilities? So this is a message that needs to be sent out. But obviously, things are really very difficult for persons with disabilities. And we hope that with this message, duty bearers that are here present will take into light in order to get in touch with the umbrella organization, which is the Gambia Federation of the Disabled, under which 16 disabled people organizations are legally registered, so that we can better mobilize, we can better coordinate, we can better come together in order to exonerate persons with disabilities from this difficult moment. Thank you.
Krubali, it's good you mentioned that there are 16 organizations for persons with disabilities in this country. I think when you said it in some places, people will be surprised. I mean, but what kind of disabilities are those you're talking about? So thank you very much for bringing out all of those issues. And these are issues that really came out in the conversations, and I really encourage folks to read the report, and we will try to share this report as far as possible. It will be online as well, and we'll try to send it on Facebook. It will be on social media as well, so that these issues are brought to the attention of not just the duty bearers, but to every ordinary Gambian to realize what's happening. So as he rightly said, when all of these responses are taking place, I'm trying to recall whether there was any program, even from the private sector or the civil society, to say, given the particular circumstances of persons with disabilities, there's this program or project, intervention going purposely to that category of the population. So I guess there are lessons to learn moving forward. So at this point, let me invite Hadi Dande Jabi. She is the president of the Female Lawyers Association and a very passionate person about women's rights. And she's also the deputy lead counsel of the TRRC, if you don't mind.
I'm not here for that today.
I know, but she, so that tells you how many caps or how many, she wears.
One thing is, Madi calls you in the morning and says you have to deliver a paper in the evening.
Yeah.
And then he puts you last. So then by then everybody has said everything you wanted to say. Not so?
I'm sorry.
Madi, being a very passionate person about women, has already said a lot about what I wanted to say about women. But looking at it, I would like to say, as women, we're always left behind. Always. When I started my activism work,
Even now,
and I will say why, even now. When I started my activism work, I only thought about women and women and women, because I only dealt with women then. But as time went on, I got to realize that persons living with disability were also left behind, and children were left behind. So I started advocating for them as well. One thing he forgot to mention is that their bill has been in Parliament. For how many years? For more than 10 years. Persons with disability, their bill got to Parliament before the Women's Act. And because they had no one to fight for them, it's still lying there. I'm sorry to say. Isn't it true, Mr. Kurbari?
Very true.
Thank you. But as women, we got up and we said we had to fight. And we did that fight. So we had the Women's Act. We were one of the first African countries in West Africa to actually have our act passed. And we're proud of that. But we're always left behind. When we had the conference, I think Mr. Kurbari will actually remember that. And they brought all the stakeholders together. And there was a conversation going on. And guess what? There were groups. And where were we? We were the last group. The women, the children, and the persons living with disability. So then what happens? In the transitional justice, we're involved, but we're always brought in last. We never get the president positions. Correct. We're being brought in, thank you, but we want more. And that featured when the COVID came. COVID affected everybody, but it affected women and children the most. I'm sorry, but I'm very passionate about what I'm saying. You had women who were pregnant, who couldn't go to the hospitals because everybody was afraid and told that you would catch COVID when you get to the hospital. Women already give birth at home, but it increased. Then what did we hear? A lot of death happened. Babies were dying because they didn't have the facility that they needed. What happened next? There was food distribution. I didn't get any in my house. I didn't need it though. Did any of the women here get food distribution in your houses? Can anyone tell me here in the women? Just say yes. Nobody. Because what happened? The officials planned it in a way that we didn't get it. And who needed it most? The women and the children. But we didn't get it. I'm sorry, it is about your report, but I have to say some of the things that we actually discussed when we had the discussions. I asked around my neighborhood, all the women there, nobody got food distribution. where did it go? It goes back to where we say we need to have structures in place that would assist women and children. We need to. Government needs to listen to us. We have a ministry. Things should go through the ministry to get to women. But it doesn't. So what happens to us? We're left behind. I think we should start looking at women. COVID came, but it already met our problems. And what did it do? It strengthened our problems. That's all it did. Nothing is new. We already have all these problems as women. So what COVID did was it came and it stopped women from going to the market. As we know, women go sometimes in the morning. They sell a few of their products and they go back by 2 o'clock and they cook food for their children and their husbands. So what happened? They couldn't do that anymore. Why? We don't have social protection. Where's our social protection gone? So when women couldn't go, they should have had cash to be able to sustain the household. But that didn't happen. They didn't think about us. And it's right in this report. Because there's a page that says, when there was a meeting, if I may read. Okay, Matt, what's your page? 12. And the participant from law enforcement said, to be honest, when COVID came, we sat as a team to plan, but we didn't have any representative from women or persons with disability. It's right in here. You cannot make the decisions for us. We feel it. It's not it bites. So we can make the decisions for ourselves. So please, when consultations are happening, when meetings are happening that have to consider the rights, the services, the implementation for women and children, please. There are many groups out there, many. You can just call one of us because we have a platform and we will communicate in that platform. I'm pleading with officials, with government. Do not leave us behind. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm out of words, really. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Yeah, so to all of us, particularly from the side of the government and the decision makers, yes, you know, there's a language, I think, in the youth sector and the disability sector. I mean, nothing for us without us. Huh? Krubala, I think that's how you say it. Yeah, so I can be passionate about women. David can be passionate about women and children. You can be passionate about, you know, persons with disabilities. But, I mean, you are not them. So in your decision making, you know, bring people who, you know, who are that, so that, you know, they, because they live that experience. They live that life. So much as you are passionate about it, you still have a limitation as to how much you can represent them, how much you can speak for them and, you know, bring out their issues as it is. All right, so having said that, we were supposed to have some remarks from actually the members of the state themselves from the National Assembly. But as you know, National Assembly is very busy these days, since last week. So they are in a sitting still now. So fortunately, we couldn't get the chair of the Select Committee for Women and Children and Persons with Disabilities. So, but the same, I think what we'll do now is actually to release the report. And so, and the concluding remarks, which I'll, you know, gladly hand over to David. And yeah, thanks.
So, first of all, I'd like to congratulate everybody who participated in this report, everybody who attended the workshops and the seminars, and actually spoke so passionately about the issues that are contained in this report. We all have made mistakes during this terrible pandemic. We've also got some things right. But the main thing is that we learn the lessons. As somebody said, you know, everybody makes mistakes, but only a fool refuses to learn from them. I was in Liberia during the Ebola outbreak, and I was also in Liberia when this pandemic came along. And, you know, I was disappointed of how many lessons we'd learned during Ebola, which everybody had forgotten. And, you know, reports had been made and people had forgotten many of the important lessons we learned during that time. So one of my pleas to you is don't forget this report. This won't be the first crisis we find, and many of the lessons learned, particularly as it pertains to women, to people with disabilities, to children, are applicable in many other circumstances, including day-to-day life. So please don't allow the report. Remember it's there when these issues come up. But so as I say, once again, thank you so much. Congratulations on getting this report out, and it just leaves me to thank Maddie and his team and to officially launch this report. So I declare this report officially launched. Thank you very much.
Yep. Okay. So
when we touch down, better broke down.
With Gamtel G-Fiber, now you can enjoy super fast internet in gigabytes. G-Fiber is affordable, stable, secured, and accessible to homes, businesses, and enterprises. With Gamtel G-Fiber, the future is speed. Gamtel, creating a brighter future in communication.
So she became mine and see the
I get it. Albaka.
Mbaka important.
Yo, nga transfer la sto.
Ya transfer la sto.
Ha, code nyenje.
Okay. What's Nsila ID soto.
Sorry. I get it.
Bijan bro.
Albaka.
Mbaka.
Bara alla service o tariya. Mbare ki janna nun kunu bara tariya.
Jannom yona forest de bureau. Gambia tonkon na no mbali ya bere. Birim koyna fo kato.
Bari si kodo kino kato ni fo bolong blabe to.
56 branches mola soto Gambia jam.
Ha?
Gambia kono anin Gambia bantala bankol. Nko kodo kiya bere to. Kodo sifa fo falindiro fo nyaadi lafta memmen na kodi to poto nin kodi maraw. Jannom number 1 ti nyonta. Andum fana nata anoda enterprise sotale. Wolam nyindi ko domorol fana kol fana be firale de dadi ma nin domorol dil fana beteat. Gambia dawda yalo ma kumfa kendol sotale je.
Wo moyo diat.
Apelenta
ni wo ka ni lafta nyelen kendol e binaji.
Yalo bukani na ko la baraka ba.
Yalo ndel chosano lo.
Abaraka.